All right, Genesis. Let's talk about Genesis a little bit. The human author is Moses, and there's some question of like, where did he get some of these records? But remember, he was in the court of Pharaoh. Date of composition is 1400 BC or 1220 BC, depending on the chronology. The historical coverage: creation through the death of Jacob's son, Joseph, in Egypt. So. Okay, remember, this is all on the PowerPoint is on the website. Should be there. It'll be there. It should be there now, actually. So, I think it is actually there. Is it there? It is. Okay, there you go. So you're just puddling along. Okay. All right, where am I? Okay, so the next point is that, you okay? What's the matter? All right. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go through these ologies. Okay, the book of sciences. Like, people don't seem to think of Genesis as a book of science. They think of it as a book of myths. But wherever you see this what is it, suffix, the ending, L-O-G-Y, I want you to think of the word logic. And so logic is math for the mind. It's like we want, if A is true and B is true, then there's a major premise, minor premise to reach conclusions. So the logic of God is that the Bible tells us that He is the Creator, the King, and the Redeemer. That's the thing that's introduced here, the logic of who God is. And then the logic of the cosmology, the logic of the universe, how it came to be. It's a leap of faith. We make a leap of faith, but it's not as great a leap of faith as others are making. Nothing decided to become something. Nothing from nothing is nothing. Billy Preston sang about that years ago. I don't know if you know that, but nothing from nothing is nothing. You got to have something if you want to be with me. That's the way it went, And you can look it up on YouTube, or I think he even played with the Beatles for a little bit. I'm sorry for the pop culture reference. It took me all up to the last part of this class to get one, but cosmology, the logic of the cosmos, is that God made it. This is what the Bible is teaching, that the university and the universe came into being according to the will and act of God. Okay? Anthropology, this is the logic of man. Anthropos is the word for man. Man is this interesting creature. He's a mingling of dust and deity. Okay? So this might tell you a little bit about the frustration level of one named Lucifer, is that God took dirt, formed dirt into something that looks something like me, and it was lifeless, and then breathed Himself into me. God breathed into man and he became a living soul. Lucifer had none of that kind of contact. God spoke Lucifer into being. But God had all of this kind of contact. It kind of makes a little bit of sense, but we're a mingling of dust and deity by the will and act of God. That's the logic that Genesis teaches us. Okay? And if you keep these logics added up in your mind, it's, you should be in good mental health. It's about trust. It's really about trusting what God is saying about how He made things. We can enjoy life a lot more if we're not worried about like where we came from and what there is to come. We're trusting God about it. Okay, sociology, the logic of society. The first circle of society is the family, and the family is founded on one man, one woman marriage. The logic of society. Like the relationship. And like, why would God do this? Well, I'm just thinking about it. The proximity of the Trinity, close quarters, learning how to relate to each other, learning how to talk, learning how to share, learning how to excite, all those things. And the logic of God is that He creates man and introduces this idea. If we put these two together and we commit them to some purpose, so the first cycle of society is the family, always will be. If there's an issue with society, it's an issue with the family. The last one is, on this page, hamartiology. It's the logic of sin. Sin is a failure of faith in the goodness of God. all right? Faith in the goodness of God. And this is really the serpent's instruction to Eve. This tree of the knowledge of good and evil, if you eat from it, you'll know things that God really doesn't want you to know. And that in essence is a true statement. God understood our frame, he knew our capacities, but now we understand that man is capable of many things that God never intended him to be capable of. But because he opened himself up to receive that, he had a capacity for amazing things, and we see the amazing things that he has a capacity for. So a failure of faith in the goodness of God. Why is God keeping that from me? There must be a good reason. That would be the answer. Why hasn't God given me a husband or a wife? There must be a good reason. He knows what you would do to her or him. Maybe, perhaps, I don't know. But sin is a failure of faith. It's a lack of trust, And this is basically why we have evolutionary theory. It's like this isn't enough. And, Bill Nye, the science guy, will be proven wrong, as many have been through the years. Bill Nye, the science guy, has said that it's now child abuse for you to teach your children that God created the universe. It's harmful. It's harmful to the American way of life because we do not have enough scientists, because too many American children believe that God made everything. Well, excuse me, how do you explain Sir Isaac Newton or Copernicus or other people who actually believed in God and thought of amazing things, right? And then the man Francis, I forget what his name is now, Francis Bacon is one also, but there was a modern guy who wrote Human Genome Project. Oh, I know. There's a guy right down the road, lives out in Carroll County. He separated two twins who were there. What's his name? Dr. Ben Carson. What about him? He believes in God and science. Anyway, next. Ethnology. The unity of the race broken up because of the progression and the confederacy of godliness. Okay? The diversity of the human race was in the mind of God all along. These things happened. It's only been the disunity that's happened is because of a confederacy of godlessness. The differences. You're different, I don't want to be with you. And so the logic of ethnology is that God made all man of. Paul preached this in Acts 17. He said God made all men of one breath and one blood. This is the Bible's determination on the human race. And if we read through, we understand that there was a boat, and everyone who got off that boat, everyone else came from. 8 people. 8 people survived the flood: Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, their 3 wives. All of us are related some way to Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And ignore the foolishness that says that certain categories of people came from Ham and they were cursed because of what he did to Noah. Yes, Noah pronounced a curse on Ham's son, but Ham's people did not Ham's people became the Canaanites. They did not become other people that were supposed. There's just this whole idea of some sort of racial inferiority because of Ham. It's out there. Slavery and all that, yeah. So, soteriology, this is a Greek word speaking of the logic of salvation. The logic of salvation is proven throughout the Bible that it must come from God toward men and involve a perfect substitute. So, when something dies, something innocent has to shed its blood to pay for the harm that was done by the one that violated God's law. And so, the perfect one, Jesus Christ, paid for all the sins of man. And then the last one is the logic of prayer. Man can call upon God and God hears. This is all covered in Genesis. Maybe you didn't know that, but all of these logics, all of these sciences, all of these logics are covered in the book of Genesis. Okay, so the other thing that we find is this whole idea of leading us to Jesus Christ. Like, where does Jesus come from? And it goes, you can go from the beginning of Genesis to the end, and we find the bloodline of the Messiah. Genesis 3:15 tells us first, that this was the promise to Eve. Someone from you, someone born to a woman in the future, is going to triumph over the mistake that you were deceived into. And that seed is going to be the person of Jesus Christ. He's going to be out of the line of Seth. Now, Cain and Abel were born. Cain killed Abel. God gave Eve another son named Seth. And Seth is and at that point, men began to call upon the name of the Lord, it says. Let me read that. Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son and called his name Seth. For God, she said, has appointed me another seed instead of Abel, whom Cain slew. And to Seth, to him there was born a son, and he called his name Enosh. Then men began to call upon the name of the Lord. So that's not very far into Genesis where we find that men have to rediscover the idea of talking with God. In the early part of Genesis 3, we know that God met Adam and Eve in the cool of the day, and that they heard the voice walking in the garden. And here we get to the end of the next chapter, and it says that men began to call upon the name of the Lord after after Seth was born, and then Seth's son was born. So the offspring of Shem, that's the next one. That's the son of Noah. And then from Shem came the family of Abraham. From the family of Abraham came Isaac. And then from Isaac came Jacob, the 12 sons of Jacob. And from those 12 sons came the tribe of Judah. So we see the bloodline of the Messiah, the laying of the laying of the foundation of who Jesus Christ would be in terms of genetics and human relationship here. All right. So the first 11 chapter of Genesis talk about the origin of the earth and the origin of the nation. And so, there's a record here of how God established his people. And that's why Abraham becomes such an important figure in the New Testament. In the New Testament, Paul is constantly taking the Jewish people back to Abraham. Back to Abraham. Let's go back to Abraham. Who was the first one who believed God and went in the name of the Lord? It is Abraham. Let me bring you back to Abraham, because after Abraham had two sons, after Abraham had Isaac, and Isaac had two sons, and then there was 12, and then it got kind of messy. But let me bring you back to Abraham. Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness. It counted. That counted. He listened to me, and that was enough for me to proclaim him righteous. He became my friend. Abraham became my friend. Adam and Eve, they couldn't handle the idea of not touching something. So I didn't deal that way with Abraham. I just told him to go. I told him to leave something behind. It's a little bit different. It's like this, God is working on the psychology of man. The strength of sin is in if you tell me not to do something, I am more prone to do it. Isn't that true? It's like that's why I keep wondering, it doesn't matter how many taxes that they place on a pack of cigarettes, people still smoke their brains out, all over the world. Sometimes more in the world. And you'd think in Europe, people wouldn't smoke as much. You go in there and they blow smoke right in your face. It's kind of queer. And anyway, strange, I'm sorry. Yeah. John Cook.
But then didn't Abraham stop?
Huh?
Didn't he stop going?
He stopped with his father. His father stopped, and Abraham continued. So, yeah. The call was to his father. I guess both of them, they were both on their way, and then Abraham moved and finally got to the place where he belonged. So we do have a record of the promises. The record is, I think the thing that God does in Genesis is for the Hebrew people is He's given them a record of just where they came from. Like they figured they had known so little about who they were living in Egypt all those years. All they knew is that they multiplied and that they were beaten and enslaved. And so God is bringing them back to their origins. This is an origin story for them. Like, where did you think you just were, you think you just woke up one day in Egypt and you were always slaves. Let me take you back to your beginning. Let me reestablish the premise of who you really are as a people of God. And what it means for you. If you can get this identity right, then everything takes care of itself. If you can get this is true of us today. If we can get our identity settled, then we don't really look for adding things to ourselves. And I think that was the goal of God's communication, is I'm going to tell you how earth began. I'm going to tell you how it all fell apart. I'm going to tell you how I had in my mind Noah and how I saved him and his family, and how from Noah came this person, this father of your faith. You know the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's who you've been worshiping. You've heard those names. Where did they come from? So Moses is writing this book and communicating these thoughts to the people of Israel to give them their sense of identity. Where did we come from? It's a big thing. People still long to do it. That's why they go to to trace their family trees. They want to know where they came from. Why am I the way that I am? I happen to be Polish, Lithuanian, and a couple other things on the other side. I'm wondering why. It doesn't really bother me so much who I am, where I came from, but it mystifies, it mystifies some people to the point where they're this reckless pursuit. Endless genealogies is something that Paul cautions against, and then the choice of a nation through which God would bless all nations. He's setting this up. And the thing is, the communication is like, don't get proud of who you are. Don't get proud. I think that was one of the sources. Look, don't get proud of who you are. I chose you, I preserved you, I brought you to where you are. Don't get too proud of it. This is the way it happened. I've had my hand on you this way. You really didn't make yourself a nation. I delivered you. I orchestrated the way that you got here. It's my sovereignty that has put you in the place. And so, all right? You okay? Okay. So, next. So there are 10 different genealogies listed in Genesis, and it brings into focus 6 persons and their families. So Adam, and then Noah, and then Abraham, and Isaac, and then Jacob, and then Joseph. So we get the records of these families again. We get like a whole list of this one had this one begat that one, this one begat that one, begat, bang. And it gets, it moves all the way through till we get to the person of Joseph. And then remember, Israel had been in captivity, in bondage in Egypt for 430 years. So he's taking them back to their beginnings in Abraham, and then taking them to the place of Joseph is the real reason why Egypt became what it became. Because God spoke to Joseph, gave Joseph the plan for 14 years, 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine. Egypt would not have been the empire it was if it wasn't for you people. So this might be just one giant, you can look at Genesis as one giant long therapy session. Look, I know you're really thinking about slavery, and you're really interested in going back, and you really think that's the way things should be, You didn't really know anything but being slaves, You ate garlic and onions and a few fish from the Nile, and you really want to go back there, but let me tell you who you really are, And you came from, let me tell you about Adam and Eve, and then Noah, and then Abraham, and then let me tell you, Egypt would not be what it is if it wasn't for one of our people, Joseph. He became the second in Pharaoh and saved the whole nation. Nation wouldn't be here. The empire would have just collapsed if it wasn't for Joseph. So, isn't that a good way to, I just think it's a good way to look at it. Okay, now in Genesis 12 to 50, we see the first idea. So we have some main events in Genesis: creation, the fall, the flood, and now we have the Tower of Babel. We have some heroes. We've seen some heroes. We have, Abel and Enoch, Seth, these guys. Enoch walked with God and was not. So, Noah was a hero, Abraham, Jacob, Leah, let's get a woman in there. Leah was a great hero. And then Joseph. And then we have some enemies. We have the serpent, we have Cain, we have now Nimrod. Nimrod was a mighty hunter before the Lord. And he orchestrated this is the idea of, again, Satan's idea is you can make yourselves, you can build yourself something that reaches to God. It's like, And so it might be twofold in Genesis. Moses is writing Genesis as God communicates it. Look, you can't make yourselves. This is why you're here, Israel. You are here because there was a flood and I saved one family. You are here because there was a guy living in a really decadent pagan culture and he heard me and he went, Abraham. You are only here because Joseph wound up in Pharaoh's court and saved the nation and saved your people from starving to death out in the land of Canaan. So he's telling all that. Don't get too, and in Babel we get the first. Nimrod was a mighty hunter. It says Nimrod was a mighty hunter, and the context of that word means that Nimrod liked to shoot down men for sport. So we see this whole idea of NFL football and everything, nailing men for sport and all that kind of thing is really rooted even in Genesis, if you can believe it. NASCAR is in here too, if you go in there. NASCAR, the chariot, in Amos, the chariots jostled each other. It's there. Anyway, just trust me, it's all there. All of it, all of what humans entertain themselves with have the roots and stuff that happened in Genesis. And one of these things is we will build something that will reach to God. We will build a tower that reaches to God. So what God did first was scatter the nations, get them out of this idea, and then God turned from dealing with all the nations to choosing the one nation. The nation began with the man Abraham, and then this begins the story of Israel. Genesis 15:6. Genesis 15:6. And he believed the Lord, and he counted it to him as righteousness. I am the Lord who brought thee out of the Ur of the Chaldees to give thee this land to inherit it. And so Abraham's command was not no, it was a go. So go there, and you will see what your destiny will be. So after we get to Abraham, we have this record of God speaking and visiting and talking. And we can look at the kinds of faith. There's like a record of 3 kinds of faith operating here in these 3 people, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We have Abraham visited by God 7 times. He had 7 conversations with God. We don't know how those conversations went, maybe. We know about the Sodom and Gomorrah conversation. God came to Abraham and, that he talked to him and told him what he was going to do to Sodom and Gomorrah. And Abraham, pleaded with him not to destroy the city if he could find 10 righteous people in a city of about 200,000. But there was an obedient faith. And the obedient faith generated more contact with God. The relationship was deeper. The relationship was more consistent. Isaac was the son of Abraham, but his faith was maybe more passive. We only have a record of 2 talks with God from him. But there is one thing that we know about Isaac, and it is a blessing to him. Isaac had one wife. Like Isaac just had Rebekah. That was the only person he had in his life. And she was barren, as Sarah was barren. Abraham and Sarah was well on in age, maybe 90 years old. 90 years old, and Abraham was almost 100, and she hadn't had a son. She hadn't had any children. But God answered, and God gave Abraham a son. That miracle son was Isaac. And Isaac means laughter. If you can believe that. Isaac means laughter. They called him laughter because it was like a hopeless old lady and a hopeless old man, And she, when God was talking about Sodom and Gomorrah to Abraham, Sarah was listening in the tent, and she's laughing. She said, "Shall I have pleasure?" It's like we're well past anything happening at that level. Shall I have pleasure and God give me a son? And it happened. God did it. Isaac had passive faith, 2 talks with God. Jacob was restless faith. And Jacob was an interesting character, trying to manipulate his way into certain situations. But he did wrestle. He knew enough to hold on to God when he had an encounter with God. He wrestled all night with the angel of the Lord. And this is one of the first instances of a Christophany, which is an appearance of Christ on the earth and in a relationship with a human being. So it happens that way. And so we have these 3 people, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This phrase is going to be used again and again throughout the Old Testament, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And I think it's repeated again and again so that the people of Israel recognize their lineage, where they came from. You are the promise. You are the gift to the world. That is your identity. You are the gift to the world from Abraham, that you would show who God really is to the rest of the world. They will be blessed. They will be blessed as I bless you. If they bless you, they will be blessed. So, all right, next. All right, I'm sorry, we won't worry about that. Okay, lasting impressions here to close the class tonight. Lasting impressions, and then we'll get a little bit more of Genesis the next time. Lasting impressions, divine institutions. In the first part of the chapter, we have divine institutions, free volition. Of all of the trees of the garden you may eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. You have a choice there. All these other trees, ignore that tree. Everything will be fine. Free volition. Man was created with a capacity to choose, an ability to choose. A divine institution. Marriage, divine institution, one woman, one man, one woman. The woman was taken from man and given to him. Family, that's the next divine institution, a national entity. So these are the fine. So as you look through the way the world is breaking down in the way the society is breaking down, all 4 of these things are things that Satan attacks and tries to discredit. One national entity, United Nations, there really is no need for nation states. Doesn't have to be. Peoples do not have to be peoples in the way that they are. We are the world. I'd like to give the world Coke and keep it company, and then 30 years later, Michael Jackson sings "We Are the World." It cycles through every now and then. Family, all of the shows now, the new normal. What is a family? There's a big question about what really constitutes a family, and then what really constitutes a proper marriage. All of these things are attacked. These 3 things we know, that's pretty obvious. The other thing is free volition. Used to be if you got drunk, you just got drunk, you were kind of stupid. If your father caught you drinking, you got grounded for a while. Now it's not my fault. It's I don't have free volition. I can't help myself. It's a disease. It's all of these things have been manipulated to sort of, these 4 divine institutions of God, they govern everything that goes on. They govern everything that goes on. So free volition was the first one. Man was given the right to choose because love is not love if it's manipulated. If it's just a manipulation and God has made us all puppets and there is no response mechanism in us, then that's not love. So 4 divine institutions, these are all active. All right, so lasting impressions, we'll answer some of these. Maybe we answered some of them already, but we can go through these things that you should keep in mind, and then we'll finish. First, let's go, why is Joseph significant? We'll start from the bottom, okay? All right, just because I want to. Just to mix it up. All right, why is Joseph significant? Yeah, he was. He was a man that was sold into slavery he was betrayed by his brothers. Jesus was betrayed by the Jews. He was sold into the world. Joseph, heard from God and had a plan and saved not only his family, but he also saved the empire of Egypt from from dying of starvation. All right? Okay, next one. Why did God destroy Sodom and Gomorrah? Who has an answer for that? Why? Sin? What kind of sin? We usually associated it with homosexuality, right? Okay, well that's right. But the real issue, Proverbs 29:8 says that scoffers set the city on fire. So, not to diminish the sin of homosexuality, but the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. Like anyone, you can approach anyone about their sin, and they can, if they fear the Lord, they can call upon the name of the Lord and be saved. So it wasn't necessary. It was not only were they living in desperate, wicked sin, but they were scoffing. There was no fear of God. And the problem with that was that Lot did not promote a fear of God in his family or among the people that he was with, He recognized angels when they came, but just remember that scoffing is like when you read some of the records of God's like the 7 deadly sins and all these things. When you read some of these things that are an abomination to God, you'd be surprised at scoffing and slander and maligning and those kind of things. God holds in God holds those as very as grievous kinds of sins, and we tend to think of murder and sexual sins as being higher on that list. But God's saying, no, if you're speaking about people, if you're talking about them, if you're slandering them, if you're scoffing about me, then that's the issue. All right. Why natural disasters and why thorns and thistles? The natural disasters is explained here. There's an explanation for it here. If you listen to and there's an explanation also in the Gospel of Matthew. Now, why is there like a earthquake and then there's a tsunami in Japan? What happens? Well, Genesis 4 gives us a little answer. It says here, after Cain had killed Abel, God speaks to Cain and says, "What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood cries unto me from the earth. Now are you cursed from the earth, which has opened her mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you till the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. And a fugitive and a vagabond shall you be on the earth." And the key phrase is, the earth opened her mouth and received your brother's blood. Innocent blood. It's an explanation. The earth is a part of who we are. We were created from the dust. That's why there's thorns and thistles in the dust, and there's also like kind of crazy, stupid, kind of weird things that come out of us. We're genetically strange. We weren't supposed to be this way, but because of sin and the fall, we have thorns and thistles in us. And the shedding of innocent blood causes the earth to quake. It shakes the earth. Why do I say this? Because in Matthew, when Jesus died and he gave up the ghost, the earth shook, the temple's curtain was torn from top to bottoms, and the rocks were broken. Innocent blood was shed, and the earth suffered a violent earthquake, such as has never been on the earth since then. So I am saying this is an explanation. Maybe people won't find it satisfying, but a mother robbed of her child is an irrational being, and she will do anything to find that child if she loses him or her in a store. She is like totally out of her mind. The earth is a woman. It says it here. She received the blood of Abel, and she has emotional, irrational reactions to the shedding of innocent blood. So the shedding of innocent blood on the planet creates the capacity for the shaking and the quaking that happens, and we don't know where it ends. The earth responds to the innocent blood that's shed on it. And America should be very concerned, because there is a lot of innocent blood that's shed in America. I'm not saying I am saying that. I am saying it makes sense. I mean, if we are made from the dust and we are related to it and our blood is shed for no reason, then innocent blood shed creates this shaking. All right. Childbirth pain, we covered that, right? We already covered that earlier. Okay. What does it mean to be created in the image of God? And this is it. Image is this Hebrew word, salem. And it's translated in idol. It's translated idol in other places in the Bible. It's a made representation. Okay? Man was fashioned to reveal God. So we are made representations of who he is. There's a couple explanations, like, some people try to explain it as saying that we were made because we have the rational thought and all these kinds of things, but really, we were made to represent God. He made us to represent him. We were fashioned to be, man's mission was to be fruitful and to multiply. And here's why. The devil had rebelled against the order of God and created some form of chaos that was in this part of the universe. And God took a space, carved a garden out of it, put man and the woman in it, and said, be fruitful and multiply. And if that had happened, if people had just gone on and done that, then the multiplication of people in faith would have brought the order back to this place. God was doing something. He was showing one of his made representatives what he could do with another made representative. Satan was a made representative of God, and he rejected that place. Man was the next made representative of God. And Jesus came and did fulfill the mission that man was created for. So corruption, alienation, you can lose your sense of relationship to your Creator. That's the alienation part. You don't really think you owe God anything. I'm self-made, and that's the deception that comes. You are a made representation for God. You were put on the earth to demonstrate something to the angelic conflict. That's why Satan is a part of all of this picture. We were put here to demonstrate what God could do in something made out of dust. And I don't think it's God flexing his muscles, needing to prove himself, but it was something that he desired to do, was to make rational, thinking, volitional beings who would respond to his love and would listen to what he has to say. And as they would listen to what he has to say, there would be a multiplication of children, multiplication of faith, and then Lucifer would be shown for the deceptor that he really was. And God would bring about an order out of the chaos that Lucifer created. The bad news is that Adam and Eve did not fulfill that mission, but the good news is that the last Adam, Jesus Christ, did fulfill that mission. He did come, he did live, and now the fruit and the multiplication of the faith that he inspires in us as the Son of God is for all of us to see. So that's the end of the slideshow there, and that's the end of our class tonight. This PowerPoint will be put up on the website. Well, it's already there, actually. And then you also have homework there. Yeah, I think I altered this, so I have to put the fresh PowerPoint. I need to update the PowerPoint. So I'll update the PowerPoint, and I added some slides towards the end of the day today. All right, Lord, thank you for being with us tonight. We thank you for leading us through the Scriptures, guiding us, Lord. We love you. We thank you. Lead us by grace through faith. Keep us safe. In your name, amen. All right, so you have your assignments. We'll see you next week. Thank you.